Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for this special webinar. Showing it to you. To me, it's one of the most important webinars I've done this year. I'm Marianne Thamm, and I'm your facilitator. And we're chatting this afternoon to Lynette Maart, who is the former head of the Black Sash, and public interest journalist Craig Mckune, who are both vital in putting together, or doing the work on this book. We're here to discuss this book, which is Hands Off Our Grants, by the Black Sash. It's a collective effort, but a very, very important collection between two covers of the absolute scandal that I think was one of the biggest ever to face us in 2017, when 10 million social grants recipients' livelihoods were placed in jeopardy because of what was happening at SASSA, and we'll get to what was going on. But why this is so important for me, and why I think this book is so important, this webinar, is because it's actually, as Mary Burton, who's a founder member of the Black Sash, says in her introduction, that it's at a time like this also, when we sit with so much to deal with, to remember that this was a victory not only for a team of urban-based human rights movements, but public interest lawyers as well, community-based non-profit organizations, but millions of South Africans who depend on social grants and security provided by the government, who collectively brought this to a point where government had to take responsibility, and the minister was actually eventually sentenced for lying about her role in this. Lynette, thank you very much, and Craig, for joining us. I'd like to begin with yourself, because this is a hell of a ongoing campaign, and we had an interesting little chat in the green room just before we went live, when we spoke about being overwhelmed, because if you look at this book and 2012 onwards, the likelihood of being overwhelmed looks massive here. So speak to us about your role and the Black Sash to begin with, and why this book in particular.
Okay, so I joined the Black Sash in September 2013. At the time when I joined, people saw quite a lot of deductions, which I will talk about just now. And I left the Black Sash in June 2021. So for that entire period, we covered kind of two big campaigns. The one was the Hands Off Our Grants campaign, which is, some of it is recorded in this book because you can't record everything in the book. And the second campaign was around a basic income grant. And that work is still ongoing with the social relief of distress grant. So when we looked at all of this, I think one of it was an evaluation that was conducted by Paris, the Public Affairs Research Institute of the Black Sash's work. And they kind of almost said that the Hands Off Our Grants campaign, and this is quoting from the evaluation, the Black Sash has applied a unique method of activism that is grounded in evidence through case studies and the application of a mixed strategy of community mobilization, negotiation with government, litigation as a last resort. This approach may be an alternative to the current more violent methods that are currently occurring in South Africa, and it's therefore important that we document and learn the lessons from it, so that we can teach and inform young activists. And it's from that angle that we thought we should kind of almost write this book. It took quite a long time. We got some seed money, and from that involved people who were in the campaign, also looking through all the different notes and minutes and so on. And yeah, this is what we have delivered from that. But it's informing practice. But it's also kind of bringing to the public's attention, to government, civil society, business, kind of.
Oops. I see Lynette. Shame. She's been struggling with her connection. She might be back soon. But Craig, your links to the Black Sash in writing the book began in 2012 when Lynette, I see she's back again, We'll see in a minute. Lynette, you've just jumped to Craig. Are you there? Sorry, Lynette, you disappeared for a second. So I've just asked Craig.
Yeah, I'm here.
You're back. 2012 is when you start to hear from grant recipients that there are these deductions happening from their grants and they don't know what they are. And they come to the Black Sash with this. And that's sort of when it begins. In 2012. I'm listening to Craig drawing a big circle there. So the two of you connected in 2012. Can maybe Craig, you tell us about that? Because Lynette disappeared there, and we all lost our. Well, we didn't. We're back here. 2012 is when you get involved, right?
Yeah, I just drew a big circle around September 2012 when I wrote a story called "Social Grant Contractors Sideline Plan." The subheader was "Controversial 10 billion rand tender winner wants to sell financial products to 10 million state beneficiaries." So this was now after some months of reporting on this contract and on this company, Cash Paymaster Services, that had been awarded a contract to distribute South African social grants. My interest had mainly been on allegations of corruption and tender irregularity, but along the way, I realized that Net1, the parent company of Cash Paymaster Services, had another plan in mind. And I think when we called it a sideline plan in this article in September 2012, we later realized that was an understatement. It was the real deal, which is a quote from the company itself. They saw its access to social grant beneficiaries that this contract gave it as a war chest. All of these social grant beneficiaries to this company were a war chest. Again, their wording. I can stop there. But that's kind of where I came in on this angle of the story.
What we're speaking about here, Lynette, is the attempt by the private sector to bank the unbanked, and who happen to be these 17 million social grant recipients, and the budget monthly was 10 billion in terms of the payouts. So tell us the experience of the Black Sash on the ground. You have advice offices everywhere, which you've had for, since the struggle days, which have helped people in terms of their conflicts and issues with government. What were you hearing from people? Were you able to hear me there, Lynette? Lynette, when did it first become evident to the Black Sash that Net1 and CPS, in terms of their tender, apart from the fact that it was declared illegal, but that this war chest that Net1 wanted to, in a sense, establish by banking the unbanked? When did you become aware that people? Oh, I'm so sorry, Lynette's left again. So I'll have to go back to you.
I can jump in there. I mean, I wasn't in the Black Sash's offices but around the same time that I was stumbling across my realization that Net1's business plan was much more than just about the profit that it would make off of the tender. At about that time, the complaints started coming in at Black Sash. I later learned, and that's how I came to be connected with him, because I began to investigate that and only really broke deeper stories on it about 4 or 5 years later even. And in that time, Black Sash were meeting with beneficiaries who had problems, and they were collecting evidence. They were taking statements. They were getting documents, which later on proved absolutely crucial in shoring up the claim and the assertion that Net1 was abusing its access to all of these people, which is something that it always denied that it was doing. But I collected some evidence which made that really hard to believe. Made their claim really hard to believe, and Black Sash's literally years of patient, supportive evidence gathering, working with actually impacted people, was pivotal and essential in bringing that home, and that led to a lot of where we are today.
Lynette, I hope we don't lose you again, because your contribution is so valuable, and just as you get to the point, the internet kicks you off. So you were the national director of the Black Sash at the time, but just explain to us then the process from 2012 when these complaints begin to come in. What is it the Black Sash does, and the involvement of other public interest organisations. Freedom Under Law, I think, was involved. CALS was involved. Just an extraordinary collection of people who then concentrate their attention on what they understand to be a problem, and that government's covering up and the ministers covering up to a certain extent, or making impossible to expose.
Okay, so the SASSA contract, 2012 for 5 years, 10 billion rand with Cash Paymaster Services, a subsidiary of Net1. It's important to look at the mandate of CPS in this contract. It was given a very generous mandate to distribute grants nationally into approximately 10 million bank accounts, affecting 17 million beneficiaries, namely elderly, disabled, and children. And also, what was quite important is that CPS was responsible for collecting beneficiaries' personal information, including biometrics that was stored on its proprietary database. And that was quite an important thing. So as we were doing our monitoring, the Black Sash and partners saw this escalating trend of deductions. They couldn't be explained. Sometimes the product was for an airtime, electricity, funeral cover, loans. And so there was a question around these unexplained deductions. Fraudulent, whether unlawful. Sometimes people also refer to them as immoral. And we started with this collection of case studies. So, for example, airtime, we would find there's an airtime typology, but if you look at the typology, there's different permutations of that. Sometimes it would just be different amounts that are deducted monthly. Other times it would be multiple deductions from multiple service providers. So Cell C, MTM, Vodacom. Loans, it would be sometimes one loan going on forever. People can't resolve it. Other times it would be two loans or several loans. We even find a deduction for water of 800 Rand. And this was in an area where water was free. And as we were tracing the issue, we discovered that these Net1 subsidiaries, so the first one was P-Bell, later it became Manji Mobile. And the Manji Mobile products was airtime and electricity. Moneyline for loans, Smart Life. But we also begin to see aggregators, companies in and outside of the fold. So Finbond, Impotel. There was a battery of Chinese companies that also kind of made particular loans. But we also then had to carefully look at everything. And what we realized was that this notion of banking the unbanked or financial inclusivity, its net effect was the creation of a bank account. And that bank account, called the SASSA branded Grindrod bank account, was almost set up like a checkbook account. So it would allow for EFT deductions, debit orders, stop orders, USSD platform deductions, which they use for airtime and electricity. It would allow for all those deductions to take place. And so when the Gogo complains, she's given a runaround. She's sent from pillar to post. And I mean, there's numerous stories in the book of that pillar to post. And that made us realize that there is no SASSA owned and controlled recourse system. And there was no talk of refunds. Net1 and CPS in particular controlled all the information. And later on, they introduced a thing called the EasyPay bank account, which was similar to that of the SASSA Grindrod bank account. And there was a fear that they might lose the contract because the Constitutional Court had ordered that the tender be reissued after the debacle in the All-Pay case. And this is what they kind of did to beneficiaries. They told some beneficiaries that this was the new SASSA replacement card, and that they will not get their grant if they don't move to this card, but they must keep the old SASSA card. Some were told that to qualify for a loan, they must, in fact, get this card. Others were forced or lured into opening the green card because they wanted a loan. And this was regardless whether the loan application was successful or not. Grant beneficiaries also ended up with this green card that they called the Easy Pay Everywhere, and deductions for airtime, electricity, funeral cover just started also on those accounts. But the thing about this is it speaks to the model, the business model of Net1 and its subsidiaries. So SASSA was paying them 16 Rand plus for the SASSA Grindrod bank account. This new account that they move people to, the beneficiary now had to pay an extra 10 Rand per month for this bank account. And there was little to do to stop this account or to revert back to the old account. And there was a lot of our work also went into finding ways of how people can revert back to the account. I'll pause there for now.
Okay. So Craig, perhaps you can talk to us about this business model, because what appears to be happening here is a sense that privatization of government functions, it lies behind the decision to jeopardize, I suppose, one of the government's best, social security nets it established for South Africans. Speak to us a bit about this business model and how the department and the minister aided and abetted this model, and how it actually came to be established, and how beneficiaries were lured in a way or encouraged to buy these products from these private financial service providers, if you can call them that.
I think any entrepreneurs or business people in the room will know how difficult it is to make a profit, and how every cost and every bit of friction to your business is difficult. It eats into the profits that you could potentially make. If you were to compare one of Net1's competitor firms, a traditional micro-lending company, it has an office in downtown Cape Town. You walk in there and you say, "Hi, I'm a SASSA beneficiary and I would like to take out a loan. I need some money desperately. I'll pay you back next month." They say, "We need your ID. We need your proof of residence, and we need proof of your income. So you need some sort of certificate from SASSA to prove that you are a grant beneficiary and how much you are earning and or making, being paid, and when that comes through." Now that I know that every single time I'm asked to hand over proof of residence, it's a problem because I keep on moving. I'm renting, or I was renting, not getting bills addressed to me at my house. It's a problem. It's difficult. So it's not simple for me to just take out that loan. I've got to find a printer. I bought a printer the other day for the first time, but basically who owns a printer? I didn't for years. My ID is often lost. So it's a problem for that business that wants to sell this product to this person that's walked in through their door, unless that person's very organized. If at the time you had instead gone to a Net1 money lending branch and walked in, all you needed was your SASSA card. And in fact, they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have a SASSA card. So grant beneficiaries go in the door with their SASSA card, and that SASSA card contains their data. It contains information about their bank account, where their social grant is paid, when it's paid, their fingerprints, their name, their ID, all that information. So you can walk in through the door with that one card, and you can put it on the table. It goes into the Net1 machine, and you get loaned your money, and then the deduction comes off your account automatically. So
can I just ask you, are there any discussions here around interest rates, repayment, the usual kind of things you would expect when a loan gets taken out?
I think Lynette might be able to answer that a little bit better than me, but to the best of my knowledge, it varied. It varied, and in short, the answer was very often no. It was very often an opaque transaction where the person borrowing from Net1 didn't really know what was going on, didn't really know about interest rates and repayment terms, and that their data was being used and so on. So there was very little clarity, but it was not something that I could get easy sight of, because I didn't go into the room. I spoke to some others who had, and they said basically they were confused. They didn't know what was going on. Terms and conditions either weren't shown to them, or they were only in English, or if they were shown to them, I mean, whoever understands terms and conditions, it's a very careful discussion that needs to be had before you borrow money, to understand those terms. So for Net1, a huge layer of friction was taken out of the business. There would be a better way to describe that. Their business was lubricated through its access to the grant beneficiary data, which it was not supposed to use for anything but paying grants. And that was the intention of the contract.
Let's stop there and ask, how did that happen? How did this private company come to be able to extract the personal data of South African citizens who are vulnerable, who are on social security, and it's a small grant? What happened behind the scenes, and who are the key role players in enabling Net1 CPS to continue this business model? I mean, in the book, you do go through all the parliamentary oversight, what happens at all those meetings. You've used the parliamentary monitoring group records of those meetings, and they're shocking to look at. I mean, Batabile Dlamini's behavior during some of those, the Scopa meetings and others, she just didn't bother to come. But Lynette, what was behind the Department of Social Development's, or the minister's, insistence on this model with this company, with Serge Bellamont and these people? What drove it?
Okay, let's go back to, I mean, we might have to go back to the contract and the contract conclusion. When the contract with CPS was tendered for, when that went out, the tender specifications were changed a week before the bidders had to submit their tenders. And in that, the tender specifications changed from may have biometric capacity to must have biometric capacity. And Robin Foyley's work on that.
One word.
Significant. One word. So there was one word that changed the fate, and that secured the contract to CPS and Net1. And with that biometric capacity, we must also understand, at the time, not even the Reserve Bank had biometric capacity yet. It was still signatures. And in fact, there was a discussion, our discussions with the Reserve Bank and so on, they were still formulating at the time, that was 2013, 14, 15, a way for banks to do biometrics. And that was only with fingerprints. So they were ahead of the game in terms of that. But now the mandate is that they are the paymaster. So they collect the information from grant beneficiaries. But the information are collected on proprietary applications.
Okay.
In other words, they retain the information, and therefore the access to the cards, as Craig has explained, the card has a chip. When you open up, the chip will reveal all sorts of information around what type of grants, how much money are given to you, etc. And that could be accessed by just touching your fingerprint. And just to explain, sort of when we were looking at the EP cases,
Easy pay,
people
huh?
were saying
That's
that
all. Easy pay, yeah.
when they went, they would be going from table to table. So the first table, you would present your SASSA card. The next table would be for the loan is right at the end, but then you go for a funeral policy, then it's airtime. And finally, when you've signed up for the Easy Pay card and you've got all these deductions, they will then tell you your loan was unsuccessful. And these could be open anywhere. Like it could be open from a boot of a car, it could be open in your lounge, it could be open in churches, etc., etc. So the control of the information, and there was constant legal battles around this one, because in the All Pay case and in the Black Sash cases, they were also, the court was saying, you need to protect this confidential information. In fact, the regulator, the information regulator, took the Black Sash court case order as her mandate to make sure that confidential data of grant beneficiaries were protected. But it was only protected in the end when we transitioned to the SAPO disbursement account, which allowed for no deductions.
When was that? That was
in 2018. In 2018.
So that's a long time of deductions happening from people.
Yeah, a long time. And also, I mean, in the instances now, you go straight to the Home Affairs rather than going through those systems. So when the court stopped the CPS contract 6 months after the actual official date in 1 April 2017, that's when we started to see the phasing out of CPS collecting the confidential data. And with that, stopped all these deductions in a way. But the new account, ring-fenced and not link, started to make it quite a challenge for those entities.
Craig, speak to us a bit about the BEE components. We're going to get to the questions people are asking about the current payouts by SAPO of grants, but we've got time. Speak to us about how Bellamont went about attaining BEE status in order to win this tender, because that's part of the political background information and possible links to Batabile Dlamini, because in the ANC, you know, you've written extensively about unraveling who it was behind Serge Bellamont's attempt to prove his BEE credentials at the time, because I think that's important for people to know.
Okay, I'd like to start with that one with a bit of a quote from the 2014 Constitutional Court judgment on this, when the court found that this tender was irregularly awarded. So we now know, as a matter of fact, that SASSA really bungled the tender. They made a number of bad mistakes, which made the process unfair. One was the last-minute technical change that Lynette mentioned. Another one was that SASSA failed to investigate Cash Paymaster's Black Economic Empowerment credentials. And that's important, because that's a place where we did investigate, and we found many red flags, many causes for concern. Before I go to those, the judge then commented, he says, an unfair process may betoken a deliberately skewed process, which seems to me to be an elegant way of saying that tender irregularities can at times signal corruption. So we were first attracted to this story for both because of its essential importance for South Africa, but also because the BEE partner who was made known publicly had various political connections. But even before that BEE partner, Serge Bellamont and Cash Paymaster Services had assembled a consortium of BEE partners, which was a front. One of those was Serge Bellamont's old BEE partner, who had cut a former social development minister into his companies. Sorry, social development minister's wife into his companies, whilst his companies were distributing social grants. So a red flag on that guy. The other two were small companies, struggling entrepreneurs from Cape Town, both of whom had links that we found to a very good friend of the Social Development Minister, Batadile Dlamini. We described in our investigative reporting how Cash Paymaster Services agreement with those people was a front, how it was effectively a sham. Let's put that aside for now. We can come back to that. But in any event, that BE partnership melted away almost immediately. Nothing became of it. Those people who were at the front of that got little to no benefit from this. Instead, after the contract was signed, the parent company signed up a different BE partnership with another man who had worked very closely with former Minister Tokyo Sekwale in his company Mvela Panda, and one of his close friends, best man at his wedding, business partner, etc., was a man called Lunga Mckune, who rose to fame for channeling fraudster Brett Kebble's money to the ANC long before that. So he was a man of a certain kind. He is a man of a certain kind of pedigree. He was the friend of the minister who I referred to a minute ago, who was linked to that initial front, and he was then also linked quietly through various relationships to the man who eventually became the BE partner. Then there was a sequence of events where Cash Paymaster Services went to SASSA and said, "Listen, we've enrolled more people for this contract than you contracted us to do, and it's cost us a lot of money. It cost us 316 million rand. So please pay us." And SASSA quickly forked over that money, and days later, Net1 did a couple of quick share trades with its BE partner, the results of which emerged as an 83 million rand payout to that BE partner. And it's probably completely coincidental that a month later, Lunga Mckune bought himself a new mansion in Bishop's Court. Now, taking the story further than that is difficult. We haven't proved corruption here. What we know is that a man who was very close to the minister, in various ways personally, who was allegedly a presence in the social grants in SASSA and in the social development department at the time when this tender was awarded and being managed, that he was close to all of the BE partners, including the ones that got the big payouts. We can call those red flags. And if I was to say that I would say that the biggest red flag that there was some sort of corruption that then led to, as they say, the tail wagging the dog, which is what we're talking about today. That's actually the problem here. Ultimately, probably the biggest red flag is the fact of the irregularity of the tender, and then SASSA and the minister's subsequent efforts to keep that in place. One of the judges in the Constitutional Court said that, I can't find the quote right now, but basically that SASSA was obstructive beyond like basically insanely obstructive in the court process. It fought tooth and nail to protect Cash Paymaster Services' interest, and we must ask why. And then we find these BE relationships which link us towards the minister, and we can only speculate from there.
Yeah, I see Lynette went out and she's back in. Lynette, sorry, you left us there for a second. Did you catch what Craig was saying there?
Can you just repeat the last comment? I didn't hear that well.
I almost forget, but I found the quote I was looking for. The judge said that through the court cases, this Constitutional Court judge said that SASSA was unhelpful, and almost obstructionist in its defense of CPS. And so on one hand, we've got a government that is bending over backwards to benefit this company, who is also not appropriately cracking down on this company when it's abusing its access to beneficiaries, which again is what we're here to talk about. Yeah. On the other hand, we've got links between the BEE partners, the cash that they're getting out of this tender, those links, and then those people are linked to the minister in certain ways. What lies between that, we can only speculate. We don't know.
Well, what lies between that, Lynette, kind of is also, first of all, the beneficiaries approaching the Black Sash, but then parliamentary oversight. I mean, as well as the court cases that where SASSA gets taken on, and this is where the Black Sash becomes involved with other civil organizations. But tell us a bit about oversight, parliamentary oversight, and what went wrong there. I mean, we were at some of those very, very heated committee meetings towards the end as we all raced towards this deadline, and no one knew what would be happening with the payment of grants to these people. I mean, I can remember the atmosphere in those meetings. The Black Sash's role from there, so if you take on, not only are you helping the beneficiaries, but you're also getting involved with as Craig says, trying to get the minister and SASSA to account. There are hundreds of resignations. There's all sorts of work streams, all sorts of personal appointments the minister sets up, Patrick Boniecki and others to run these work streams, and nobody can quite work out what this is. Tell us a little bit about that part of the battle.
Okay. So maybe just to start with it, that these deductions started prior to 2012, and some of the MPs started to raise these problems in the portfolio committee. The minister and SASSA starts a funeral cleanup policy to try and see what they can do about these deductions. But the deductions continue. And our assessment of why the deductions continued is that you have this contract, that's a legal contract between CPS and SASSA. It is such a broad scope, and it allowed for its business model. So the business model is described as, first wave, you get an entity like a big government hooked onto your technology products. And then secondly, you add on products. So the 10 million wasn't sufficient over the 5 years. What they wanted was a bigger slice of the actual grant budget. And so these deductions continue. There's various discussions around it, etc., etc. And then the Constitutional Court dispensed of its duty in 2015, at the end of 2015, saying that SASSA, there's no more a need to, they retendered, they didn't appoint a company to continue the tender. So the CPS contract continues with all these problems. But the minister then had to prepare, and SASSA had to prepare an in-source plan, because the next jump was to get the function in-sourced into SASSA. But in 2016, and we serve on this ministerial task team, that we are able now to monitor where things are going. We write a letter in September and we say, hold on, where is the delivery of your outsourced plan? And they say, well, we'll come back to you. Civil society will be consulted when we have this plan together. And so Parliament tried to hold the minister accountable for this plan, but no plan get delivered, or the plans that get delivered are so inadequate that it doesn't really take anything into account. And it was with that reason, you watch all these discussions, you watch all these efforts by parliamentarians to hold each other accountable. There is a split between what the ANC parliamentarians do and what the parliamentarians from other parties do. And there seems to be sort of almost a backing of the minister by her party until the crisis blow up again. The Black Sash take the matter to court because we can't see how SASSA is coming forward with an insourcing plan. And when
and at this point, it was supposed to be SAPO as well. I mean, the South African Post Office was going to be part of that insourcing plan.
The SAPO comes into the equation, but the problem was that whilst SASSA had to deliver this insourcing plan, it was also negotiating with CPS to extend the contract for another couple of years with an increase in the price. And that kind of was in the media, there was speculation of all of these. So we went to the court. I mean, SASSA was supposed to also deliver to the Constitutional Court a plan, but nothing happened. They were just extending the contract. And so our case then helped us to say, okay, an extension of another 6 months, but not beyond that point for this contract. And it was mainly to do with those cash pay points that they didn't have a plan for. Secondly, the Constitutional Court reinstated its accountability or oversight mechanism. And there was tensions in the parliamentary committee around why is the Constitutional Court doing this? What's our respective roles? And you will see in the book how we work through that. But that court order was significant because it then said we will, with the support of a panel of experts comprising 10 people, the Constitutional Court will now monitor the implementation of an insourcing plan.
Which is quite a significant thing for the court to say, if you think about it, because if you look at what was going on at SASSA and the work streams, and that nothing was occurring, and that individuals handpicked by the minister reporting to her were making quite a lot of money out of it. So it's extraordinary judgment that actually.
Yes, in that ways. And here the Constitutional Court takes on the accountability mantle versus parliamentary committees. And that requires quite a lot of discussion and debate about what is going on in our parliament. Why is it not able to hold the minister to account? So the court also then calls for a Section 38 inquiry into the minister's conduct because of these work streams. And it found the minister guilty of causing this crisis because she was supposed with SASSA to have an insourcing plan so that we don't get back to this position of it being outsourced. There was also another interesting development earlier on with the All Pay case is that the Constitutional Court ruled that when you are performing a constitutional mandate, say like Social Security, you actually become an organ of state. So an organ of state is not really defined necessarily by the fact that you are a government entity. And so it almost brings CPS into an alignment of saying you will account financially for this deal. And there's still debates and discussions of whether you are actually entitled to the profit that you are generating from this contract. So there's two levels there. The one is the profit that they make, that they can sort of the payment of the grants. But there's a piece that's slightly still being contested is, so you also need to report on all the monies that you are making from the second wave, which is the sale of airtime, electricity, and all those other subsidiaries that are also raking in money. But the Constitutional Court kind of judgment after the Section 38 inquiry found the minister has caused this crisis. They then bill her in a personal capacity for some of the costs, and they also ask that an investigation be done in terms of perjury. And she was also found guilty of that, either doing jail time or paying a fine. I will stop there.
Well, interestingly enough, that's where that gets to. But Craig, is that an interesting legal ruling that the Constitutional Court makes, that if you're going to be insourced to provide a government function, that you don't make profit out of it? I mean, in a sense, that will, I think, prevent others from quickly thinking they'd like to do business with government, particularly if it's a social grants. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary, I think, ruling, in a sense, that if you are going to be performing the functions of government, that you are going to be accountable in the same way. I mean, I find that quite extraordinary, unless it's just me. But that doesn't lead to anything. What it leads to is SAPO taking over. So we've got Patabile Dlamini not necessarily having been held to account, apart from the perjury at the inquiry at this point. But we have SAPO now running the grants. We've got questions, as Craig said. Some people have been asking, at the moment, we've just had a news thing coming in that the more than 900,000 people currently affected by SAPO's struggles to render services. I mean, that's a lot of people. Is SAPO actually, we know it's in trouble. Was this a mess, going from one mess into another mess? What is the situation at present? I don't know, Craig, if you've been following it. No. I like what Craig said to me earlier on, was that this story was the start of his career as an investigative journalist, and it took him to the end of it. He was finished at the end of it and is now... so the same for the Black Sash. I mean, this journey, when you read this book, it's unbelievable how the struggle and the fight and the ongoing battle to bring government and Patabile Dlamini to account. But Lynette, sorry, speak to us now about SAPO. We've got a little bit of time left. And what is the current position? I mean, most of us are not really don't have much faith in SAPO. And was that the right decision?
Well, I'm not going to. Let's put it like this. SAPO did implement the special ring-fence bank account, so that there's no deductions from people's bank accounts. Secondly, a policy was put in place for fraud and refunds, and in that first year, a couple of millions was spent on refunding grant beneficiaries. So on the question of people having a protected account, that was a good thing. The challenge was SAPO's institutional capacity, and currently there are problems around management of finances. The footprint is decreasing, and particularly in the urban areas. And there's also challenges with the payment of the social relief of the stress grant, particularly those who were kind of paid in cash. But I think the broader challenge is SASSA's capacity to work with this. From that broad mandate that they gave CPS, in that it can almost do everything, it did insource some of the components of its work. So one of it is that it created a reserve bank account, and that reserve bank account.
Oh, what a pity. Lynette will be back. There she's back. That reserve bank account.
Right. The reserve bank account. Yeah, the reserve bank account allows it to receive all the money from National Treasury. In the past, National Treasury paid CPS. Okay. And it accumulated a lot of interest from that. And so that breach has been blocked. Yeah, there was
a lot of argument about that interest that accumulated in that account as well. But that's go on. Yeah. Sorry, the second.
The second one is about SASSA's capacity to now pay grant beneficiaries directly into their bank accounts, regardless of whether it is a SAPO bank account or a cheap commercial bank account or any other bank accounts. So that is a thing that is very useful. But I think the SAPO footprint and SAPO's problems is particularly relevant to those who are in rural spaces where there is no banking infrastructure. And hence the issue was to work with retailers so that people can actually draw money from those retailers without huge costs. And so that people's bank accounts are protected. But there's another challenge here, which is in the past, SASSA used to pay about 16 Rand plus for these accounts. SAPO's figure is slightly higher than that. But SASSA seems to not be paying any more for people to withdraw their money. So all the bank fees, the administration fees are now falling onto grant beneficiaries. And then just with the social relief of the stress grant, there are a whole range of issues, from it being promulgated under the Disaster Management Act and moving that now into the Social Assistance Act. And then there was the government dropped the means test amount from the food poverty to something like 350 Rand. They've also asked all beneficiaries to re-register. And many people have not received the grants that were promised by the president in his speech, in his State of the Nation speech. For April and May, nobody had yet received. And there's problems with registration because it is on a platform. You're not allowed to move into any office to make an application. You have to make all these applications online. The questions that are being asked, like the ID of your mother and the ID of your father, and maybe they might have died many, many years ago when you were a child, or all of those kinds of things make it make access to this grant very difficult. So I think the SAPO issue can be dealt with if SASSA agrees to pay an amount for administration fees, particularly withdrawal fees. And then some of these cheap bank accounts have problems with fraud on them. So people's money might be taken out of the bank account, and then there isn't a fraud mechanism or a insurance protection on these accounts that enable it to go forward.
There's a comment from Neil Coleman here, which you might have addressed some of them. He's got civil society has consistently been raising concerns about multiple problems that have been reported by beneficiaries since the payment of the social relief distress grant was shifted to administration under the Social Assistance Act from the beginning of April. You've just said now. However, we were shocked to discover over the last few days not a single SRD grant has been paid in April or May 2020. This is a scandal and a national disgrace. While there have been problems prior to April 2020, over 10 million beneficiaries were being paid on a monthly basis. That's a lot of people. Government has now needlessly and recklessly reversed this achievement, and the poorest of South Africans have been thrown into a catastrophic situation. What this means is that 11 million of the poorest who have previously been paid the SRD grant are no longer being paid the grant. And Neil says this is a disastrous situation and may affect half of the population if you consider that each beneficiary could have around 2 dependents. That's quite shocking. Do you want to speak to that at all?
No, I think I've said my points, and I think that civil society need to challenge all of that, and because the social relief of the stress grant is a very important contribution to the basic income grant. There are millions of people without jobs, and food security is a particular issue for many of those households. And there isn't big attempts to create jobs. So the ongoing debate around a basic income grant is what the SRD is part of. But right now, those administrative challenges and access challenges needs to be fixed immediately.
Well, I like what you say, because again, the book shows you that we can do these things when we work in concert together, and that people feel often that there's no, Craig, you said you cut your journalistic teeth on the story. Is that what you told me earlier on, if I remember correctly?
Yes, basically.
And what has it left you with as an investigative journalist? I mean, just because, being on the ground and not getting your grants, but then investigating why and how, and was it backbreaking, soul destroying?
it's quite difficult to talk about that in a forum like this, where people like Neil and others are raising the problems that but I mean, there's something to that. It's basically I think it's basically traumatic on one level for all of us in South Africa to see this kind of failure roll out and be replicated, and to the extent that we are pleased with some of the successes around pushing back against abuse or alleged abuse or whatever from Net1 and bad management from the government. Here we sit with a social grant system that is unstable. So yes, on a personal level, I found that very traumatic, but I think it's quite hard to.
No, it is. But I think exactly. But at the same time, also just Black Sash and all of those organizations as well. You were saying earlier as well, it looks like such a huge problem, and it affects so many millions of lives. And Lynette, you were saying you learned it from your past experiences that you focus and move. I think that's a very important thing for you to say at the moment. The same as Craig also said, you can't be overwhelmed by the numbers and the horror of a failing and unstable social grant system. But tell us a little bit about what you learned and what that was that drove this, alongside all those others who worked with you, those organizations, to get to this point. It's not ideal, but at least government has to respond to citizens and civil society because of this long battle that you've been part of. What was your thing?
Yeah. I think that the first thing was that, there are many challenges. And with state capture and corruption, there's many issues that you can take on and feel disheartened. When I joined the Black Sash, the social security issues were the big ones. But even then, we went into the social grant system because we felt that a lot of people are affected by that system. 17 million at the time and counting. And when the SRD grant came into effect, around sort of 11, 12 million people. And I mean, that's a large portion of the people. And if you can just make a difference there, so stop all this nonsense about the deductions coming from people's account, the meager money that they have disappear into financial products that they don't necessarily want and need, and also the administrative costs related to that. And then just the processes. Sometimes when you apply pressure, you can have a peaceful march, but that's not sufficient. You need to attack the system on multiple levels, from courts to and as a last resort, because we use that as a lot. But it's working with the people who are affected. It's seeing where their energies are. It's engaging them. I mean, I take my hat off for people like my Grace, who for the first time traveled by plane, came to Cape Town to a meeting with the minister and stated very, very clearly, this is what is happening to me. The minister then dismissed our translator, asked her officials to check all my Grace's details after taking her ID, etc. But she stood her ground. She spoke in a vernacular, and she just held out. I mean, I take my hat off for Mr. Barney, who went from place to place and just keep on going. And that kind of resilience, that in the face of adversity, that you just keep on going. I really took energy from that. Yeah.
Well, we should take energy from your work, Craig, from the Black Sash's work, Lynette, over the years. I would recommend the book. Thank you to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for sponsoring this event. This book is available from the Daily Maverick Shop. Get it because it will inspire you, and it has from cover to cover every single complex issue we couldn't discuss in an hour. And I thank you very much for my two guests for being here and for attempting to cut through this, and for all of those of you who joined in and asked questions. we're not at the end of the road. But thank you to people like yourselves and our insiders who support us. At this time, we see that South Africans really can achieve a victory if we work long and hard together. And as you say, people stand up and speak. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and the two of you for being my guests. Take care, everybody, and please do buy the book. Keep it on your shelf. You will have to refer to it often. So after that, I think that's it. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody. We don't know what's happening in the news. We've been caught in this room. Let's go see. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.